Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So I thought a lot about what I wanted to do for the off season just with the football videos doing so well. And I thought it'd be fun if I went through every team and just kind of almost did like a recap, like a what went right, what went wrong, go through some stats, go through where I think they're going next year. I think that would be a really fun thing to do during the off season. I hope that all of you like it. And I thought it would be best to start with my favorite team, the Patriots, and what has been a very frustrating season, I think is the best word for it. Because overall, it really did end up mediocre. Like 7-9 is not terrible. Like it's not like we were the Jaguars who went 1-15. It just the whole time it felt like we were worse than we were. And we probably were worse than we were. I think we just had Belichick just leading the charge on everything. But anytime that this Patriots team would start to get any kind of momentum, it would just get shut down immediately by a stupid loss or something stupid happening. And as a Patriots fan, it was just so frustrating, especially after the dynasty, obviously, and with Tom going to the Buccaneers. So let's dive in and look at exactly what went right and what went wrong for the Patriots this season. So just for some general stats, we were 7-9, 7 wins, 9 losses, third in the AFC East, which is the worst that the Patriots have done in a long time. We had 326 points overall, which was averaging around 20 points a game, which was one of our weaker stats. That made us 27th in the league. But we had only 353 points against us, which was around 22 a game, which was actually 7th in the league. So these stats alone make it pretty clear that the offense was a lot more the problem than the defense, which is a surprise because of all the players that opted out with COVID. A lot of the Patriots' key players, like I guess key defensive players, opted out due to not wanting to play with the virus. So it's interesting that despite that, with Belichick being such a great defensive mind and some of the players that we do still have, seeing that the Patriots defense was still able to be pretty effective. So going over to the offensive side of the ball, Newton was our main quarterback this season. He played 15 games, just missing one because of COVID. He had a 65.8 completion percentage. He threw for 2,657 yards. And so he had 8 touchdowns and 10 picks, which that really doesn't sound that good. But he did have 12 rushing touchdowns, which is pretty good. I think he actually led the league in that. Maybe Lamar got it, but I actually don't think he did. I think Cam got it. And he had a QB rating of 82.9, which is not very good. And I think the main problem for Cam was he was just a turnover machine. And I don't know that not all of it was his fault, but there were definitely a lot of things that he could have done better. He needed to make sure to keep control of the ball more effectively in a lot of those big situations that honestly lost us games. Our main running back was Damian Harris. He played 10 games. He had 691 yards and averaged 69.1 yards per game, which is not very good. The way the Patriots running back situation ended up handling itself this season was we had a lot of okay running backs with Rex Burkhead and Sony Michel and Damian Harris, who, that's why these stats aren't as impressive, is that like 691 yards is not very much. Like Derrick Henry honestly probably had that by October. But Patriots, what they would do is they would give it to Burkhead, then they would give it to Sony, and then they'd have Cam run one, and then they'd have Harris run one. But then Harris kind of ended up becoming our lead running back. But we never had anyone great. We never had, I mean, I'm not even going to say like a Dalvin or a McCaffrey because that's almost expecting too much. But we never even really had anyone that was like that even like good or great. So we had a lot of okay guys who were running the ball who, and most of them are just inconsistent above anything else, is that would have a great game here, terrible game here. Sometimes they can get the ball 9 yards, sometimes they can't even get it 1. And it was just a lot of back and forth. So I feel like one thing that we should try and figure out for the offseason is just the best way to use the amount of running backs that we have. Because we have a lot of like okay ones, maybe even good ones, but we don't have anyone that's great. We don't have a superstar, which if used right, that can be really effective, but it just feels like we're not quite using it the way that we need to be with the inconsistency. Our main receiver ended up being Jacoby Myers, who played 14 games. He had 59 receptions and 729 yards, which I was kind of surprised to see those stats because that's a lot better than I think it seemed like. Like, it's nothing great by any means, but he was able to be pretty effective. He actually averaged 12.4 yards average for each catch, which was really impressive. and he had around 52 yards a game. So he's another situation where he wasn't a star, but he ended up being really productive, and, he was our top receiver. He was pretty much all that we had. I think the problem is that Jakobi Meyers is not a number one guy. He's good. He is a pretty good number two guy and like a really good number three guy, but he can't be your number one guy. And this became very apparent when he started to gain some momentum, and then teams who had smart coaches realized this and put their best corners on him. And then all of a sudden he wasn't as effective. So that makes you think that, okay, this guy is not leading our team, which is, I think, the main focus that we should have for the draft and for the offseason. I think we just need to get some kind of weapons. Because while Cam was a bit of a turnover machine, he didn't have anyone to throw to, no one that can get open. Like, Damiere Byrd can't be your number two guy. I don't even know that he should be on the team. He wasn't that bad, but he was not at the level that he needed to be at to be effective. And so, with Jakobi Meyers being our top receiver, while he was good, I just think for this team to be successful, we need to get some kind of weapon, some kind of superstar, someone who can be really productive to make Meyers a really strong number two rather than a weak number one. And so on the defensive side of the ball, we really were not that bad this season. We had 24 sacks, which was nothing like great, and I think it was actually probably our biggest weakness was getting pressure on the quarterback. Because if you really think about it, that was like 1.5 per game, and I'm pretty sure on one game we had like 6 sacks or 7 sacks or something like that, which means there were a lot of games where we just were not getting to the quarterback in the ways that we needed to. We had 18 interceptions, which is pretty good. That's more than one a game. And the most impressive thing was J.C. Jackson, who actually had 9 of those interceptions. He ended up being very productive for us this season. I'm excited to see how he comes up next season. We only had 4 fumble recoveries and only 5 forced fumbles in total, which those stats just show that our pass rush is not where it needs to be. We are not getting to the quarterback fast enough. We're giving them too much time. And while our secondary with Gilmore and Jackson, I think, are really solid, I just think we need to have a better ability of getting to the quarterback. So next, I wanted to look over all the general positives for the season. So I wanted to look at some positive for the season, but to be honest, there's really not many. I thought for a while about this, and there's very few things that I could come up with that really went right for the Patriots this season. It feels like there were a lot of things that like were almost starting to go right, but then they would just kind of fall apart. It just felt like everything was falling apart. But they're really, like, it wasn't a dumpster fire. Obviously, Belichick is the first thing that comes to mind. He, especially this season, showed what kind of coach he is. Like, this guy was winning games that our roster should have had no chance of winning. But he was just outsmarting everyone. And it really just showed how lucky this team has been to have him and what a genius football mind he is. To just have someone that can literally win games just on coaching alone is just rare. And I think with him we have someone or something rare. And then what? This is kind of what I mean, is like it's kind of hard to think about exactly what went right. But to be fair, with the lack of a roster, we did see some unknowns really step up this season. Like Damian Harris. No one really thought anything would come of him, and he ended up being our top running back. And similar to Jakobi Meyers, he was our top receiver, but no one really expected him to be. So in the situation when there was no one, they tried to be someone. And I really liked that. At least we were playing with a little bit of heart in most of these games. Some of them it looked terrible, but in some of these games we really looked like we were trying to prove ourselves. And we saw that out of Meyers and Harris. And J.C. Jackson was also, he was kind of with them. He really stepped up this season, and he ended up being probably our best defensive player, almost easily. But other than that, and even that's a little bit of a reach of like, we played with heart. There just wasn't a lot of things that went right for us this season. Which brings me into the negatives, which that list is going to be a lot longer. So, yeah. As we really alluded to in this video, there were a lot of negatives in this season for the New England Patriots. And the main ones were really on offense. Because our defense, special teams continued to be good enough and productive enough. But our offense just was not getting it done in the way that they needed to. There was a little bit of hope. After Tom Brady left, us Patriots fans were feeling very lost. We were really thinking like, oh, are we really gonna play Stidham? We're gonna be terrible. Like Stidham, I don't think is the guy. I mean, we hadn't really seen him play, and he wasn't very impressive when we did see him play. And when it was announced that Cam Newton was signing the 1-year deal, I'll be honest, did a lot of us Patriots fans, we kind of started to have some hope. Yeah, what could go wrong? Like, maybe it won't really work out, but then we're in the same spot we're in, but maybe it will, and he'll really prove that he's this great quarterback, which is what he seemed to want to prove, and then all of a sudden, we're still a good team. But that wasn't so much the case, and I wouldn't say that this whole season is Cam's fault, because really, I don't think that Patrick Mahomes could make this team look good. It just because he had no one to throw to. And not a ton of protection either. And so it was just a little disappointing, I guess, because kind of before the season there was a little bit of buzz among us Patriots fans, like, oh, is Cam going to be like the next guy for a while we kind of start to rebuild here? We can rely on him. I just don't think he was. And I personally don't think he should come back next season, but I don't know. If we can keep him for cheap, I guess I don't mind, because he's, like I said before, he's not really the problem, but he still is a problem. He turned over the ball way too much. Like, 10 picks is too much. And usually they were his fault. It wasn't even like one of those where like, oh, it got tipped and, it ended up in someone's arm. Like, usually he was way off on a throw, and then the opponent's corner, safety or whatever, just caught it and took it. And then another thing, like I talked about before, is we never really found our identity in the run game. Like I said, we had a lot of guys who were good, but no one who was great and no one who was productive enough, consistent enough to really be getting it done, which forced Cam to throw, which obviously led to bad things. And also, we just had no weapons. You could argue that we started with Edelman, but I don't think that Edelman is the weapon that he used to be, sadly. And I just, it makes it sad because he had so many great years with the Patriots, but I just think after everything he's done, he's too old, he's too banged up, it's too much for him. And I don't even know that he'll be returning next year. I don't even know. I mean, I still want him to, he won't be as productive as he had been in years past. And our offense was just a problem. We need, for next season, to get more weapons, or else this team just will not work. It'll be like this season where Belichick will be good, and we'll have a couple guys who will stand out and step up, but we're not going to be productive enough. We're not going to make the playoffs with a team like this. We need to do some serious rebuilding in the draft, in some trades. I think we're actually decent on cap space, so I think we should just use that to advantage. Pay these people a lot just to get a decent team here. And the last thing I want to talk about is the pass rush, kind of like I talked about before. It wasn't as big as a problem as the dysfunctional offense, but it was still a problem. We really weren't pressuring quarterbacks. We were not getting sacks. We were not forcing fumbles. And I think that's just another thing that we need to work on coming this offseason. And so this kind of brings me into where I think we should go for the offseason and what exactly I want. And I go back and forth with this a lot. I really wanted Stafford, but that is gone now that he's going to the Rams. I think I'd be okay if we kept Cam, keep him for cheap, and just get some other guys, get some weapons, get a couple guys in the defensive line who can do some productive things for a better pass rush. I don't know. It feels like this team has a lot of work to do. And I think that it's just an incomplete roster with a good coach. And I think we just have to trade a lot. We just have to trade for a bunch of like second round, third round picks instead of first round picks. We can't be going too high. We need to rebuild a team. We need to have a long-term plan, kind of like it seems like the Lions are doing, rather than a short-term plan, because we are just not anywhere near a team that could even make the playoffs. Let me know what you guys thought about this season. I, as a Patriots fan, just come away really disappointed and frustrated with how it all ended up. And I hate that a couple times my hopes even got up. Oh my God, we're starting 2-1. We looked incredible against the Raiders, and then all of a sudden we're like 2-5. Then all of a sudden we're like 6-5, and then all of a sudden we're 7-9. So it was just a frustrating experience throughout. I hate that my hopes kind of kept getting up, and then we would just lose stupidly. But let me know what you guys thought of the whole series. I plan to do one of these, like I said earlier, for each team in the NFL. I think it'll be a fun way to just recap the season, some fun stuff to keep putting out stuff during the off season. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.